The gunshot echoed across the prairie, making Hannah Olsen flinch as she huddled deeper into the corner of the cabin. The wound in her side had stopped bleeding, but the pain still pulsed with every heartbeat. 3 days as Ethan Lockhart's mail-order bride, and here she was, trembling at every creak and rustle from the wilderness outside. "You're safe now," Ethan said, his voice low and steady as he bolted the door. His broad shoulders blocked the last sliver of moonlight before he turned to face her. "Nobody's getting in here tonight." Hannah's fingers clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You don't know them like I do," she whispered. "They'll find me. Montana Territory, 1875. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd answered the advertisement for a wife in the Silver Creek Gazette. Ethan moved about the cabin with practiced efficiency, checking windows and loading his Winchester rifle. His movements were deliberate, unhurried despite the danger lurking beyond their walls. In the lamplight, Hannah could see the weariness etched into his face, the stubble on his jaw dark against his tanned skin. "I should never have come," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "I've brought nothing but trouble." Ethan paused, his blue eyes finding hers across the room. "That's not true." He set the rifle against the wall before kneeling beside the fire, adding another log. Sparks spiraled up the chimney. "Those men would have found a reason to cause trouble with or without you." Hannah shivered, remembering how quickly everything had fallen apart. The stagecoach, the gunman, the desperate flight to Ethan's homestead, a place she'd never seen until they were running for their lives. She'd arrived in Silver Creek with hope in her heart, only to find herself caught in the crossfire of someone else's war. "Who are they?" Ethan asked, settling into the chair across from her. Hannah hesitated, wondering how much to tell this man she barely knew. Her husband, the word still felt foreign in her mind. "The Blackwell Gang," she finally said. "They worked for my former employer in Chicago." Ethan's expression darkened. "Blackwell? I've heard the name. I was a bookkeeper for his company," Hannah explained, wincing as she shifted her position. "I discovered discrepancies. Money missing, accounts that didn't exist." She swallowed hard. "When I confronted Mr. Blackwell, he offered me a choice: keep silent or disappear. So you ran. I thought I'd gotten far enough away." Her laugh was bitter. "I was wrong." Ethan stood abruptly, moving to the window and peering through a crack in the shutters. The moonlight silvered his profile. "How many men did you see tracking you?" 3, maybe 4. Hannah closed her eyes, trying to recall details through the haze of fear. One had a scar across his cheek. Another wore a black duster. "Morgan and Calhoun," Ethan muttered. "They've been terrorizing settlements across the territory for months." "You know them?" "Of them." He turned back to her, his expression grim. "They're hired guns, not lawmen. If they're after you, someone's paying them well." Hannah felt cold despite the warmth of the fire. "I never meant to bring this to your doorstep." Ethan's gaze softened. "This isn't your fault." He crossed the room and knelt before her, taking her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "I promised to protect you when I sent for a bride. That promise stands, no matter what." She studied him, this stranger who was now her husband. His features were strong, a straight nose, firm jaw, eyes the color of the summer sky. Nothing like the soft-handed businessman she'd known in Chicago. Ethan Lockhart was built by hard work and open skies, as solid as the mountains on the horizon. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough." He squeezed her hand. "You're brave. You stood up to a powerful man when you discovered his crimes. You traveled halfway across the country alone. And even wounded, you haven't given up." A small smile touched his lips. "That tells me more about your character than a lifetime of conversations could." Something warm unfurled in Hannah's chest, fighting against the cold fear that had been her constant companion for weeks. Before she could respond, a horse whinnied in the distance, and she tensed, her eyes darting to the window. "Just the wind," Ethan said, rising to his feet. "But we should get some rest. Dawn comes early, and we'll need to make plans." "Plans?" Hannah echoed. "To deal with Blackwell's men." He crossed to a trunk in the corner and pulled out extra blankets. "I won't let them take you, Hannah. This is your home now." Home. Such a simple word for something she'd been searching for her entire life. "The bed's yours," Ethan said, arranging the blankets near the fire. "I'll sleep here." Hannah felt a rush of gratitude mingled with something else she couldn't quite name. Thank you. As she settled into the rough-hewn bed, pulling the quilt up to her chin, she watched Ethan check the doors and windows one final time. In the flickering firelight, his movements were sure and steady, a man at ease in his own domain. Ethan, she called softly as he prepared to douse the lamp. He turned, his expression questioning. I'm glad it was your advertisement, I answered, she said. A smile, brief but genuine, crossed his face. So am I, Hannah. So am I. The lamp went out, plunging the cabin into darkness save for the red glow of the dying fire. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. But for the first time in weeks, Hannah felt the knot of terror inside her begin to loosen. She wasn't alone anymore. She closed her eyes, and despite everything, sleep found her quickly. Hannah woke with a start, sunlight streaming through the cracks in the shutters. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, the unfamiliar ceiling, the scent of wood smoke and coffee. Then memory returned. The gunfight, her wound, the cabin. Ethan. She sat up, wincing at the pull in her side, and saw him by the stove, his back to her as he worked over something sizzling in a cast-iron pan. The domestic scene struck her as incongruous against the danger that had brought them together. Morning, Ethan said without turning, somehow sensing she was awake. How's the wound? Hannah gingerly touched her side. Better, I think. Good. Breakfast is almost ready. He glanced over his shoulder, and she was struck by how different he looked in daylight, younger, somehow, though the lines around his eyes spoke of hard years on the frontier. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her strength. Her dress was wrinkled and stained with blood, but there was little to be done about that now. She smoothed her hair as best she could and made her way to the table. I'll need to check your bandage after we eat, Ethan said, placing a plate before her. Eggs, bacon, and biscuits, simple fare, but the aroma made her stomach growl. Where did you learn to cook? Hannah asked, genuinely curious. A shadow passed over Ethan's face. Necessity. My father died when I was 15. Had to learn quick or starve. I'm sorry. He shrugged. It was a long time ago. He sat across from her, his own plate heaped high. What about you? Any family back east? Hannah shook her head. My parents died in a tenement fire when I was 16. I've been on my own since then. So we're both orphans, Ethan observed. Seems fitting we found each other. Found each other. As if they'd been searching, though neither had known what they sought. Hannah felt a flush rise to her cheeks and focused on her food. We need to discuss our situation, Ethan said after a few minutes of silence. Blackwell's men won't give up easily. No, Hannah agreed. Her appetite suddenly diminished. They're persistent. There's a U.S. Marshal stationed in Helena. I could send for him, but it would take days, maybe longer. We don't have days, Hannah said, her voice tight. They'll find us before then. Ethan nodded, his expression grim. Then we'll have to handle this ourselves. How? There are at least 4 of them, and only one of you. 2 of us, he corrected. Can you shoot? Hannah hesitated. I've never fired a gun in my life. Then it's time you learned. He rose, carrying his empty plate to the wash basin. As soon as I check your wound, we'll start. The thought of handling a weapon terrified Hannah almost as much as Blackwell's men, but she nodded. All right. Ethan's touch was clinical as he examined her side, his fingers gentle as he applied a fresh poultice of herbs to the shallow gash left by the bullet. You were lucky, he said. Another inch, and it would have hit something vital. Lucky, Hannah echoed, not feeling it in the slightest. Once her wound was rebandaged, Ethan led her outside. The morning air was crisp, the sky an endless blue vault overhead. Hannah had been too preoccupied with their flight to truly take in her surroundings before, but now she saw that Ethan's homestead was nestled in a small valley, with mountains rising in the distance. A creek meandered nearby, and beyond the cabin stood a barn, a corral with 2 horses, and fields of what looked like wheat stretching toward the horizon. It's beautiful, she said, surprised by how much she meant it. It's not much, Ethan replied, but she could hear the pride in his voice. Not like Chicago. No, it's better. And in that moment, Hannah realized she spoke the truth. Despite the danger, despite the strangeness of everything, there was something about this wild place that called to her soul. Ethan showed her to a clearing behind the barn where he'd set up several bottles on a fence rail. We'll start with this, he said, offering her a revolver. It's lighter than the rifle, easier to handle. Hannah took the gun gingerly, surprised by its weight. I'm afraid I'll be a terrible shot. Everyone is, at first. Ethan moved behind her, adjusting her grip and stance. His chest pressed against her back, his arms encircling her as he guided her aim. Breathe slow. Squeeze the trigger, don't pull. Hannah was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his body, the clean scent of soap and leather. She forced herself to concentrate on the bottles, on his instructions. The gun's report startled her despite her preparation, and she missed the target completely. I told you, she said, disappointed. Try again, Ethan encouraged. Focus on the sights, not the target. By the 10th shot, Hannah had managed to hit a bottle, sending glass shards flying. She lowered the gun, surprised by the fierce satisfaction that coursed through her. Good, Ethan said, and there was respect in his voice. Very good. They practiced until Hannah's arms ached, then moved on to loading and cleaning the weapon. By midday, she felt a new confidence, a sense that she wasn't completely helpless against whatever might come. As they walked back toward the cabin, Ethan suddenly stiffened, his hand going to the pistol at his hip. Get inside, he said, his voice low and urgent. Now. Hannah followed his gaze and saw dust rising on the horizon. Riders approaching. Is it them? She asked, fear clutching at her throat. Can't tell yet. But we're not taking chances. Ethan ushered her toward the cabin, his expression grim. Remember what I showed you. If I tell you to run, you head for the creek and follow it north. There's a cave about a mile upstream where you can hide. I won't leave you, Hannah protested. Ethan's eyes met hers, fierce and determined. You will if I tell you to. Promise me. She swallowed hard. I promise. Inside the cabin, Ethan positioned her by the window with the revolver while he took up the rifle. They watched in tense silence as the riders drew closer, resolving into 3 figures on horseback. It's them, Ethan confirmed, his voice tight. Morgan, Calhoun, and one I don't recognize. Hannah's heart hammered in her chest. What do we do? Wait. Let them make the first move. His eyes never left the approaching men. They might not know for certain you're here. But hope faded as the riders slowed, clearly examining the ground around the cabin. Tracks, Hannah whispered. They can see we've been outside. Ethan nodded grimly. Stay low. Don't fire unless I tell you. The men dismounted about 50 yards from the cabin, tying their horses to a scrub oak. They conferred briefly before the tallest, a man with a scar cutting across his right cheek, stepped forward. Lockhart, he called. We know you're in there. Send out the woman, and we'll be on our way. Ethan's jaw tightened. Not happening, Morgan, he shouted back. This is private property. You're trespassing. We ain't here for trouble with you, Morgan replied. Just the girl. She's a thief and a murderer, wanted back east. Hannah gasped. That's a lie. I know, Ethan said softly. They're trying to provoke us. Morgan took another step forward. Be reasonable, Lockhart. You don't even know her. She's not worth dying for. Something dangerous flashed in Ethan's eyes. Last warning, Morgan. Get off my land, or I start shooting. The man in the black duster, Calhoun, Hannah presumed, spat on the ground. There's 3 of us and 1 of you. Those ain't good odds. 2, Hannah whispered fiercely. There are 2 of us. A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. 2, he agreed. Then, louder, I'm not asking again. The 3rd man, shorter and wiry, had been circling toward the side of the cabin. He suddenly raised his rifle and fired, the bullet splintering wood near the window. Ethan's response was immediate, a single shot from his Winchester that caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Stay down, Ethan commanded Hannah as he shifted position, moving away from the window as return fire erupted from Morgan and Calhoun. Hannah's hands trembled on the revolver, but she remembered Ethan's lessons. Breathe. Focus. She peered cautiously over the windowsill and saw Calhoun making a dash for the water trough at the side of the house. Without thinking, she aimed and fired. She missed, but the shot was close enough to send him diving for cover. Ethan glanced at her, surprise and approval in his eyes. Good girl, he murmured before turning his attention back to Morgan, who was using a fallen log as a shield. The gunfight seemed to last forever, though in reality it was probably less than 10 minutes. The 3rd man had dragged himself behind a rock, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Calhoun was pinned down behind the water trough, unable to move without exposing himself to Hannah's fire. Morgan, however, had disappeared from view. Where did he go? Hannah whispered, scanning the yard frantically. Ethan's expression was taut with concentration. I don't. The rear door burst open with a crash. Hannah whirled to see Morgan lunging into the cabin, gun raised. She fired without thinking, the revolver's report deafening in the enclosed space. Morgan staggered but didn't fall, swinging his weapon toward her. Ethan was faster. His rifle but connected with Morgan's temple with a sickening crack, and the man crumpled to the floor. In the sudden silence, Hannah could hear nothing but her own ragged breathing and the ringing in her ears. Are you all right? Ethan asked urgently, moving to her side. She nodded, unable to form words, the revolver still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Outside, a voice called, Morgan? You got her. Ethan motioned for Hannah to stay silent, then moved to the door. Morgan's down, he shouted. And you're next if you don't clear out. A tense silence followed, then the sound of retreating footsteps. Moments later, they heard horses galloping away. They're leaving? Hannah asked incredulously. For now. Ethan checked Morgan's pulse, then bound the unconscious man's hands behind his back with a length of rope. They'll be back, with more men. But we've bought some time. Hannah sank into a chair, the reality of what had just happened washing over her. She'd shot at a man. Might have hit him if Ethan hadn't intervened. The thought made her stomach churn. Hey, Ethan said softly, kneeling before her. You did well. You kept your head. I was terrified, she admitted. Being brave isn't about not feeling fear, he said. It's about doing what needs to be done despite it. His words settled something in her, a realization that perhaps she was stronger than she'd believed. What happens now? We need to get you somewhere safer. Ethan glanced at Morgan's unconscious form. And I need to get this one to the sheriff in Silver Creek. We're leaving. Hannah looked around the cabin, this place that had been her haven, however briefly. Just for a while. Ethan squeezed her hand. I won't let them take this from us, Hannah. But right now, your safety is what matters most. Us. The word echoed in her mind, carrying implications she wasn't ready to examine. How soon can we travel? She asked instead. As soon as you're packed. Ethan was already moving with purpose, gathering supplies. There's a place in the mountains, an old friend's hunting cabin. No one will find us there. Hannah stood, determination replacing fear. Then let's not waste time. Within the hour, they had Morgan secured on one horse, unconscious but alive, while Hannah and Ethan shared the other. The movement aggravated her wound, but Hannah bit back any complaints. She was acutely aware of Ethan's solid presence behind her, his arms encircling her waist as he guided the horse through increasingly rugged terrain. They traveled in silence for the most part, each lost in their own thoughts. The landscape changed gradually, pine forests giving way to steeper slopes and rocky outcroppings. By late afternoon, they reached a small settlement nestled against the foothills Silver Creek. Wait here, Ethan said as they stopped behind the livery stable. I'll turn Morgan over to Sheriff Davis, then come right back. Hannah nodded, suddenly nervous about being left alone, even briefly. Be careful. Always am. He gave her a reassuring smile before leading Morgan's horse toward the jailhouse. As she waited, Hannah studied the town. Silver Creek was larger than she'd expected, a proper main street with wooden boardwalks, a hotel, saloon, general store, and various other establishments. People moved about their business, oblivious to the drama unfolding at the edges of their community. A normal life. That's what she'd hoped for when she'd answered Ethan's advertisement. A quiet existence far from Chicago's noise and corruption. Instead, she'd brought danger to his doorstep and thrown both their lives into chaos. Stop it, she murmured to herself. This isn't helping anyone. Ethan returned sooner than she'd expected, his expression troubled. Sheriff's holding Morgan, but he says there's been talk around town. Strangers asking questions about a new bride coming in on the stage. Hannah's heart sank. So they know I'm here. They suspect. Ethan mounted behind her, his arms once again providing a secure embrace. But they don't know where we're headed next. They left town by a different route than they'd entered, avoiding the main roads in favor of game trails that wound deeper into the mountains. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valleys, Hannah felt exhaustion settling into her bones. Not much further, Ethan promised, as if reading her thoughts. Just over that ridge. The cabin, when they reached it, was little more than a one-room structure of rough-hewn logs, but to Hannah's weary eyes, it looked like paradise. Ethan helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Who does this place belong to?" Hannah asked as Ethan unlocked the door. "Henry Edwards, old trapper who saved my life during a blizzard my first winter here." Ethan lit a lamp, illuminating the sparse interior. "He's gone south for his health. Won't be back till spring." The cabin was basic but clean: a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, table and chairs, and shelves stocked with preserved foods and other supplies. Ethan quickly started a fire while Hannah sank gratefully onto the bed. "You should rest," he said, his voice gentle. "I'll keep watch." Hannah wanted to protest, to insist that he needed sleep as much as she did, but weariness overwhelmed her. "Just for a little while," she conceded. She must have fallen asleep immediately, because the next thing she knew, weak morning light was filtering through the cabin's single window. She sat up, disoriented, and found Ethan dozing in a chair by the fire, his rifle across his knees. The sight of him vulnerable in sleep, his features relaxed, stirred something in her chest. This man who had risked everything for a stranger, who had welcomed her into his life without question. What had she done to deserve such loyalty? As if sensing her gaze, Ethan's eyes opened. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. "Morning," he finally said, his voice rough with sleep. "You should have woken me," Hannah chided gently. "You need rest too." He stretched, rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness. "I'll sleep later. How's the wound?" Hannah probed her side carefully. "Better. Hardly hurts at all now." "Good." He rose, moving to the small stove in the corner. Hungry. She realized she was, ravenously so. Starving. They settled into a quiet routine over breakfast, oddly domestic given their circumstances. Hannah found herself studying Ethan's hands as he worked, strong, capable hands that could be gentle or deadly as the situation required. "What will we do now?" she asked as they washed the dishes together. Ethan considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Morgan will face charges for trespassing and attempted murder, but that won't stop Blackwell. Not if he's as determined as you say." "He is," Hannah confirmed grimly. "He can't afford to let me testify about what I found in his ledgers. Then we need to make it so he has nothing to fear from you." Ethan dried his hands on a towel. "We need evidence enough to take to the federal authorities." Hannah stared at him. "The ledgers are in Chicago, locked in Blackwell's office safe. Then we send for them." Ethan's eyes held a gleam of determination. "You must have had allies there, someone who would help." Hannah thought of her former colleague, Julia, who had warned her about Blackwell's suspicions. "Maybe, but it's dangerous to involve others. More dangerous to let Blackwell keep hunting you." Ethan sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me, Hannah. You deserve a life free from fear. We both do." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." "I know enough," he said again, echoing his words from that first night. "I know you're worth fighting for." Something shifted between them, then a recognition, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had dared to name. Hannah found herself leaning toward him, drawn by a force she couldn't resist. The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. But as Hannah responded, it deepened, becoming something urgent and necessary. Ethan's hand cradled her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Hannah saw the wonder in Ethan's eyes, a mirror of what she felt herself. "I didn't plan that," he said softly. "Neither did I." She smiled, feeling strangely light despite everything. "But I'm glad it happened." He pressed his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. "When I sent that advertisement, I never imagined. I just wanted a partner, someone to help build a life with. I didn't expect to feel this way." "How do you feel?" Hannah whispered, needing to hear the words. Ethan drew back slightly, his gaze steady. "Like I found something I didn't know I was missing. Like I'd do anything to keep you safe, not just because it's right, but because the thought of losing you is unbearable." His honesty humbled her. "I feel the same," she admitted. "And it terrifies me. Everything I've ever loved has been taken from me. Not this time." His voice was firm, a promise. Not us. Us. There was that word again. But now it held new meaning, a future neither had anticipated, but both now desperately wanted. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Ethan was immediately alert, moving to the window. "Riders," he said, his voice tense. 3 of them, coming up the trail. Hannah's newfound happiness evaporated. "Blackwell's men." "Can't tell yet." Ethan checked his rifle. "But I'm not taking chances. Get your revolver." They positioned themselves on either side of the door, weapons ready. Hannah's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Whatever came, they would face it together. The riders stopped outside the cabin. A voice called out, not Morgan or Calhoun, but someone unfamiliar. "Hello," the cabin. "Sheriff Davis from Silver Creek." Ethan and Hannah exchanged surprised glances. "Sheriff," Ethan called back cautiously. "Got news you'll want to hear, Lockhart." "Can I approach?" "Slow and easy," Ethan instructed. "Hands where I can see them." 3 men dismounted. Hands raised, a silver-haired man with a sheriff's badge, a younger deputy, and a third man Hannah didn't recognize. "What's this about?" Ethan asked, keeping his rifle ready as the sheriff approached. "Got a telegram from Chicago," Davis said, reaching slowly into his pocket and withdrawing a folded paper. "Seems your bride there has some powerful friends." Hannah stepped forward, confusion evident on her face. "What do you mean?" The sheriff handed her the telegram. "Federal marshals raided James Blackwell's offices yesterday. Found evidence of massive fraud, money laundering, the works. He's been arrested, along with half his operation." Hannah read the telegram with shaking hands. It was from Julia, confirming everything the sheriff had said, adding that she'd been working with federal investigators for months, gathering evidence against Blackwell. "I don't understand," Hannah murmured. "Julia never told me." "Probably protecting you," the sheriff suggested. "Anyway, the third man with Blackwell's hired guns confessed everything after we patched up his shoulder. Seems Blackwell was more afraid of you than you knew." Ethan lowered his rifle, relief evident in his posture. "So it's over? They won't be coming after Hannah anymore." "Not unless they want to break out of a federal prison," the sheriff confirmed with a grim smile. "Which is where they're all headed." The third man with the sheriff stepped forward. "Mrs. Lockhart? I'm Albert Reynolds, U.S. Marshal. I'll need a statement from you about what you discovered in Blackwell's books, but that can wait until you've recovered." Hannah nodded, still dazed by this sudden turn of events. "Of course. There's more," Sheriff Davis added. "The reward for information leading to Blackwell's arrest. $5,000. Marshal Reynolds here says it's yours. $5,000. A fortune." Hannah looked at Ethan, seeing her own shock reflected in his eyes. "We'll leave you folks to discuss this," the sheriff said, seeming to sense the moment's weight. "Marshal Reynolds will be in Silver Creek for a few days when you're ready to make that statement." After they departed, promising to return the following day to escort them safely back to town, Hannah and Ethan stood in silence, the telegram still clutched in her hand. $5,000, Ethan finally said, his voice hushed. "Do you know what that means?" Hannah looked around the small cabin, thinking of Ethan's homestead, of the life they might build together. "It means we can expand the farm, build a proper house. Is that what you want?" Ethan asked, moving closer. "A life there with me?" Hannah reached for him, her heart fuller than she'd ever imagined possible. "It's all I want. A home, a future, with you." His arms encircled her, strong and secure. "Then that's what we'll have." 6 months later, Hannah stood on the porch of their new house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The homestead had transformed, fields expanded, a larger barn built, and this house, solid and welcoming, with real glass windows and a proper kitchen. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Perfect," she agreed, leaning back against him. Her hand covered his where it rested on her slightly rounded belly. Their child, due in the winter, another miracle neither had expected. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he posed occasionally, as if still amazed by their good fortune. Hannah turned in his embrace, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "Only that I waited so long to answer your advertisement." He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the evening air. "Better late than never, Mrs. Lockhart." As darkness settled around them, they remained on the porch, talking of plans and dreams, their voices mingling with the night sounds of their land. No longer did Hannah tremble at every noise from the wilderness. This was her home now, this man her heart's true destination. Later, as they lay together in their bed, Hannah traced the lines of Ethan's face with gentle fingers. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night in the cabin?" "I said a lot of things," he murmured, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "You said, 'You're safe now.' And I didn't believe you." She smiled, memories softening the edges of that terrifying time. "But you were right. I meant it then," Ethan said, drawing her closer. "And I mean it now. Always." Hannah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. But the sounds no longer brought fear, only a deep appreciation for this wild, beautiful place that had become her sanctuary. "I love you, Ethan Lockhart," she whispered. His arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Hannah Lockhart, now and always." As sleep claimed them, Hannah's last conscious thought was one of gratitude for the courage that had brought her west, for the man who had kept his promise to protect her, and for the life they were building together on this frontier. A life that had begun in terror but had blossomed into something more precious than she could have imagined. In the years that followed, their homestead flourished. 2 more children joined their firstborn strong, curious children who grew up knowing the value of hard work and the blessing of love. Hannah never forgot those first frightening days, the trembling and fear that had marked her arrival. But more vivid in her memory was Ethan's steadfast presence, his unwavering belief in her, and the words that had become the foundation of their life together. "You're safe now." And she was. They both were, in the home and family they had created together on the edge of wilderness, their own perfect piece of the West, where they had found not just safety, but the deepest kind of love.